And we are following this breaking news right now that former President Trump has been indicted by a New York grand jury. I am joined right now by Ron Schmidt, a political science professor at USM. And Ron, again, let's start with the history being made here. This is a former president being indicted for the first time ever for a crime here in America.
That's right. We have never seen a former president indicted before. So all of this is new ground.
Yeah, and
the Manhattan DA has been very cautious, and I think that's probably a big reason why.
Yeah, go ahead and explore that too. I know that there's been some claims I know especially on Donald Trump supporters saying that the fact that the DA Briggs in New York is even pursuing this is political. We hear Democrats though saying the fact it's taken him so long and he's been so cautious is a sign that he's trying to not make it political. How do you weigh all that? What's your take on that?
I think I would go between those two. I would say that I think he has been very hesitant, and I can imagine very political reasons for doing that. To be the first prosecutor to go after or to indict a former president is a risky move for someone holding an elected office. He decided not to indict in a previous case, and a couple of prosecutors quit over that. So I think he was reluctant to do this. The fact that he's doing it now then maybe has a little more weight.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the political stuff. Obviously, we waded into a little bit of the politics here when it comes to how this is being perceived. How about the way that this could play into the 2024? We already are hearing that again as a potential and likely candidate for president. There are rules that govern whether or not you can run if you've been indicted or if you've been convicted. Maybe the more accurate way to say that. How do you see this sort of playing out?
It's a really hard call to make at this point because of Donald Trump's previous behavior, as opposed to other presidents that we can look at. I would think, I would guess, just sort of knowing his record, that this will initially at least seem like an opportunity to do some fundraising and to curry support with his backers, because the assertion that he is being victimized by the federal government is one that he has made before, and that has worked for him, at least as a candidate and as a fundraiser. But in the long run, I think it would be difficult for other leaders of the GOP to feel comfortable running for the presidency again with a candidate who not only lost re-election and lost them the Senate, but who now is under criminal indictment.
Yeah, again, it's there's a lot of factors here, as Ron, you and I have been talking about here. And again, as somebody who's been analyzing this and looking at the implications of this, you can't help but be struck by, again, the fact that there have been so many investigations involving the former president, though, but so seemingly smoke on a lot of different fronts. Obviously, he's still being indicted, being investigated. For example, the documents at Mar-a-Lago. Things like that. And yet this is the first time, though, we've seen an actual indictment.
Right. And January 6th, too. So there have been people who have said that this was sort of the smaller game. I think there was an expectation that DA Bragg might wait to indict until, say, the January 6th case moved forward. But the charge here, well, actually, let me be more careful. We don't know what the charges are yet. The indictment is still sealed.
Right. It's still sealed.
But the investigation is not just one into hush money. It's into hush money in the form of an illegal campaign contribution related to a presidential election and the suppression of information that would have been of use to voters. So that is significant.
Do you take, it almost is like, this may be a bad analogy, but for example, we had, back in the day, we had Martha Stewart was indicted on and convicted, not necessarily for what she did, but sort of the cover up of what she did. This is maybe a bad analogy, but in this case, it's not just the way that the fact that he wanted to pay off somebody from talking, allegedly. The fact that it may have been done in the context of a presidential election is sort of how it's done. And the context in which it was allegedly done is a big part of why, again, there appears to be an indictment and the risk of a conviction for a former president.
That's right. The Access Hollywood tape was released not long before these choices were made. So the Trump campaign was dealing with the release of him on audio tape. And was there video? I think just audio.
There was just audio as far as the conversation at that point. Yes.
In which he said, horrible things about basically sexual assault. and they survived it. And then the possibility of Stormy Daniels or someone else coming out and making a statement about this clearly seemed very alarming. And that's the moment when they made the decision to try to silence that story. And one of the president's attorneys, Michael Cohen, was the one who delivered the money, and he did that initially out of his own account, which is how we get into the campaign finance donation issues. It was the context of this very much points to an attempt to hide something of significance from the voters through breaking campaign finance laws.
And does it matter, in your opinion, Ron, the fact that you mentioned Michael Cohen, the fact that he's already serving time in jail for this exact issue?
Mm-hmm.
Does that speak? And apparently he is a cooperating witness now for the DA's office. Does that weigh into all this?
I would have to assume. I mean, again, we won't know until we see the documents themselves, which probably won't be open until next week. But the fact that someone who said he was directed by the former president to do what landed him in prison is involved as a witness has to be worrisome to Donald Trump, I imagine.
Well, Ron Schmidt, any closing thoughts? Anything I haven't thought to ask you about this historic day of apparently a former president being indicted for a crime in America?
It's pretty sobering. It's I mean, justice has to be done, and we'll see how this plays out and what happens. And it's important that the investigations are going to be able to come to fruition. But it's also a sad day to see this. These charges and to see this story playing out.
All right, Ron Schmidt, a political science professor at the University of Southern Maine. As always, Ron, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.